Here's a multi-season Masters Season 13 weapons tier list. We're going to start with S tier. So S tier is basically any weapon that if you see it, you're going to pick it up regardless of what you already have. And I think this one's actually pretty easy. I would say that the Havoc, specifically if it has turbocharger, is S tier. This gun is absolutely insane. The Mastiff, now that you can easily 100 pump people, just absolutely crazy. I pick up the Mastiff every time I see it in the care package. I would also consider the Volt to be S tier. The Volt has literally zero recoil. It is a one-clip machine, especially in the hands of a controller player. That is not to talk down to controller players. You guys are fucking goated. But I would pick up the Volt every single time. I would also consider the Car to be S tier. The Car is simply the best SMG in the game. Its time to kill is absolutely insane. You have flexibility of using two different types of ammo, two different types of mags. It can hold attachments for another weapon if you're needing something that's a little more versatile, like an R301. Now, this is very on the edge. This is in between A and S tier, but I'm going to put it in S tier. Now, some people would put the Wingman in S tier, but I'm trash, so I'm going to put it in A tier. The Wingman is just simply very good right now, especially in the right hands. If you are good with the Wingman, it does good damage. The headshots are insane. It has good hip fire. It is very economic. That's one of the reasons that it is so good, even in competitive, is because you don't need much ammo. It has 3 attachments total, and in reality, you really need maybe 2. You don't have to have the boosted loader, and it can absolutely decimate people if you are accurate with it. The R301 has always been a mainstay of Apex, being between A and S tier. It's one of my favorite guns. It's so easy to use. It's an easy A tier candidate. Another A tier weapon is the charge rifle. The charge rifle is probably the best sniper rifle. We're going to talk about the Kraber in a little bit, but the charge rifle is absolutely insane. You know, it's literally Kovac simulator. You're going to be able to hit all your shots. I would say the flatline is still as strong as it used to be. It has had some minor nerfs, and a lot of people have forgotten how the recoil pattern works since it has been in the crafter for a season. But the flatline is a great ground weapon, and a lot of people like to run it. I would definitely consider the flatline to be A tier and one of my favorite weapons to pick up. Now, I know this is going to be controversial, but I would actually put the Kraber as B tier. Because of the Kraber nerfs, it's not that the Kraber is useless. It's that I would rather have a more reliable weapon oftentimes. And it depends on the end game situation, since I'm going to assume that we got the Kraber in the end game. It just depends on what is going on, whether I want it or not. But I'm simply not able to one-shot people with it anymore. Not being able to one-shot, you can still put in some chunky damage, and it is definitely a useful weapon. And it's a cross between A and B tier, but I would not pick up the Kraber every single time now. There's a lot of weapons I'd rather have. In endgame, I'd rather have a Mastiff or a Turbo Devo. Speaking of Turbo Devo is right on the edge. Because it relies so heavily on the turbocharger, and oftentimes I'd rather just have a Havoc over the Devo personally, I'm actually going to put it in B tier, but it's definitely on the edge between A and B tier. I like the Turbo Devo a lot. Now, I know a lot of people would disagree with me with this, but I actually would say the Spitfire is B tier. I know everyone thinks the Spitfire is overpowered. Its time to kill is relatively low compared to other weapons. Yes, it has a big mag, and I think it does too much damage per bullet, personally. Its recoil is a joke, but it's on the edge of A and B tier, and really, I think it should be a B tier weapon. If they just gave it a damage nerf, we would be chilling. I think the Peacekeeper is definitely in between A and B tier as well, but in my hands, it is B tier. In other people's hands, it could be A or S tier, but in my hands, it's B tier, so that's where I'm putting it. But I think really, in reality, it's an A tier weapon. I think the G7 Scout is also a B tier weapon, and it's not because it is bad. The G7 can be absolutely disgusting, but I'm trying to keep A and S tier to be literally the best weapons ever, and B tier being the majority of the weapons that you would find. I think the Scout can be really good in the right hands, but I'd rather have almost every other care package weapon, to be honest. Low key, I think the bow is actually B tier. I think the bow is way better than people give it credit for. The bow can be just absolutely disgusting, especially in the current Rampart meta. Rampart bow headshots are nasty, especially if your bow is firing at a decent rate of fire. I think the Alternator is actually also B tier. And you guys aren't going to hate me for this, and I'm going to go ahead and show it. I think the R9 is at best B tier, but really C tier. I would actually rather have an alternator most of the time because it's more reliable. But in reality, my alternator is holding my attachments for my car SMG or my R301, and that's all I use it for. I think the Rampage is also solidly sitting in B tier. I essentially use it like a G7 Scout, but the heavy version, and you can just kind of like hold the button down and it goes. I don't think it's as good as people give it credit for, because if somebody's strafing and you're not leading your shots because of the low rate of fire, you're going to miss most of those. I would say that the 30-30 is definitely C tier. It can be any weapon can be disgusting in the right hands. But personally, I find it unreliable. And one of the reasons for this is actually me having to think so hard about the bullet drop, because it has an insane amount of bullet drop. But I think it can be really good, especially if you let it charge up and hit those headshots. The Hemlock also, some people might disagree, but I think the Hemlock is actually sitting in C tier. It's not my favorite heavy weapon. With all the other heavy weapons in the meta currently, I think the Hemlock is okay, but I'd just rather have other stuff. I think the Triple Take is also C tier. It's not bad, but it takes energy ammo. A lot of people don't run energy, and if I find somebody who is running energy, it's probably a Turbo Havoc, and I'd rather have that. There's better poke weapons out there. I honestly say I'd rather have a charge rifle, a Kraber, a G7 Scout, a bow, or a Rampage over the Triple Take, in all honesty. I think the Prowler is also sitting solidly in C tier. I use the Prowler almost like a shotgun. I don't think it's a bad weapon. There's just other weapons I'd rather have. I would say in D tier, we have really only two weapons. I'd say we have the Longbow and we have the L-Star. All the other energy weapons are better than the L-Star. I just don't like it ever since the nerfs. Personal opinion maybe, but it's just not that great. And I would rather have a charge rifle every day over a longbow. It's just more consistent. Longbow gets those nasty headshots. You can put someone down very fast with the longbow, but you need 1 billion attachments for this thing. You only need one attachment to make this gun good. And finally, we have E and F tier. I would say E tier is definitely the Sentinel. Some people will say, oh, I use the Sentinel like a shotgun. It's so good. In reality, the Sentinel can be just unreliable. That's really my gripe with it. It's unreliable. It doesn't put out DPS like other weapons. And as far as a sniper rifle goes, I'd rather have the other two. I'd say the Mozambique is E tier, although in some arena preds hands, this gun is absolutely insane, especially with hammer points. But I would rather have most of the weapons in the game over a Mozambique. And in F tier, we have the Eva, nerfed into the ground. It's absolutely trash. It's probably the actual worst gun in the game. The P2020, always been a weak gun. It's supposed to be that way. And the RE45. No, there's no disagreement. The RE45 is literally trash. It has too much kick. Oh, you can get a nasty beam, maybe if they're like 2 meters away. But other than that, it's kind of useless.